You'll never build anything great. Those words still echo in my mind every morning when I wake up in my corner office overlooking downtown San Francisco. My name is Jessica Thompson, I'm 29, and 3 months ago those same words were thrown at me like poison across our family's backyard barbecue table. Yesterday, my company MindBridge Technologies went public with a market valuation of $2 billion. But let me take you back to that devastating Sunday afternoon when my own father looked me in the eyes and delivered what he thought would be my professional death sentence. If you've ever had a parent crush your dreams with a single sentence, or if you love stories where the underestimated child gets the ultimate vindication, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe because this story proves that sometimes the most painful words become the most powerful fuel. The Thompson family hierarchy was established long before I understood what favoritism meant. My brother Michael, 2 years older, was the crown prince of our middle-class Portland household. Every wall displayed his achievements. Football captain, valedictorian, full scholarship to Stanford, then Harvard Business School. Our dining room conversations revolved around Michael's latest conquest, while my late-night coding sessions were dismissed as Sarah playing on her computer again. Dad, a traditional construction foreman, believed success meant following proven paths. Michael's corporate trajectory made sense to him. My passion for artificial intelligence and machine learning might as well have been witchcraft. The breaking point came during my senior year at Oregon State when I developed an AI algorithm that could predict supply chain disruptions for manufacturing companies. The prototype caught attention from tech investors, and I was invited to present at a Seattle startup conference. I remember rushing home with the invitation, breathless with excitement, finding Dad in his workshop. "This could be huge," I explained, showing him the conference details. The algorithm could revolutionize how companies manage inventory. He didn't even look up from his project. "Jessica, you need to focus on getting a real job after graduation. Michael's already lined up interviews at 3 Fortune 500 companies. Maybe he can help you get something in admin." The casual dismissal of my life's work felt like a physical blow. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would prove him wrong, no matter what it took. The barbecue that would shatter our family dynamic forever happened on a sweltering July afternoon, exactly 2 years after I'd graduated and been building my startup in stealth mode. I'd driven down from San Francisco to celebrate my cousin Emma's engagement, my Tesla Model S drawing curious glances from neighbors as I parked outside our modest family home. The contrast wasn't lost on me. I was living in a different world now, but I still craved my family's recognition and approval. The backyard buzzed with extended family, the smell of charcoal and barbecue sauce mixing with laughter and conversation. Michael held court near the grill, regaling everyone with stories from his new position as a senior analyst at Goldman Sachs. At 31, he embodied everything my parents had dreamed of: 6-figure salary, Manhattan apartment, engagement to a lawyer from a prominent family. I watched from the patio, nursing a beer and trying to work up the courage to share my own news. For 18 months, I'd been working 16-hour days building MindBridge Technologies with my co-founder and best friend from college, David Chen. We'd bootstrapped the company with our savings, living on ramen and determination while developing our AI platform. The breakthrough had come 6 months earlier when Walmart agreed to pilot our supply chain optimization software. The results exceeded every projection: 23% reduction in waste, 31% improvement in delivery times, and cost savings in the millions. Word spread quickly through the industry, and suddenly every major retailer wanted our technology. Just last week, we'd closed our Series B funding round, raising $87 million led by Sequoia Capital. The valuation placed MindBridge at $400 million, making my 42% stake worth more than Michael would earn in a decade. But looking around the barbecue, watching my family celebrate his conventional success, I felt like that dismissed college senior all over again. The invitation to share our funding news had been burning in my pocket all afternoon. The conversation that would change everything started innocuously enough. Uncle Tom, Dad's brother who owned a small plumbing business, was complaining about supply shortages affecting his work. "It's impossible to predict what parts I'll need," he said, gesturing with his beer. "Sometimes I'm waiting weeks for basic materials while jobs pile up." I saw my opening. "Actually, that's exactly the problem my company solves," I said, stepping into the circle. "We've developed artificial intelligence that can predict supply chain disruptions before they happen. We're working with some of the biggest retailers in the country." The group fell silent, and I felt every eye on me. Dad's expression shifted from surprise to something darker. Annoyance, maybe even embarrassment that his daughter was interrupting serious conversation with her computer hobby. Supply chain AI? Michael laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. Jess, that's pretty niche. I mean, real business is about relationships and proven strategies, not some algorithm. Heat rose in my cheeks, but I pressed on. We just raised $87 million in funding. Walmart is expanding our pilot program to 200 stores. The technology is saving them millions. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I watched my father's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, anger. He set down his beer with deliberate force. 87 million? His voice carried across the backyard, causing conversations to halt. Jessica, I don't know what fantasy you're living in, but you need to come back to reality. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dad, it's not a fantasy. I can show you the press coverage, the funding announcement. Enough. The word cut through the air like a blade. I've watched you chase these pipe dreams for years, playing with computers, living in that expensive city, pretending you're building some empire. He stood up, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow over me. You'll never build anything great, Jessica. You're just not cut out for it. Michael understands business, understands what it takes to succeed in the real world. You're living in a delusion. The words hit me like physical blows. Around us, 20 family members watched in stunned silence. My mother's face had gone pale, but she didn't speak. Michael looked uncomfortable but didn't defend me. The only sound was the sizzle of meat on the grill and the distant laughter of children playing in the front yard. I need some air, I whispered, and walked toward the house, my legs shaking with humiliation and rage. In the kitchen, my Aunt Sarah found me sitting at the breakfast table staring at my hands. Honey, your father didn't mean... Yes, he did. My voice was steady now, cold as winter rain. He meant every word. That night, driving back to San Francisco with tears streaming down my face, I made a promise to myself. I would prove him wrong so completely, so publicly, that he would never be able to pretend those words didn't matter. The man who told me I'd never build anything great had just given me the motivation to build something extraordinary. The weeks following the barbecue became a blur of 18-hour workdays, fueled by equal parts ambition and wounded pride. My father's words had lodged themselves deep in my psyche, transforming from painful memory into rocket fuel. Every morning, I woke up thinking about that moment of public humiliation, and every night I fell asleep planning how to make those words the most expensive mistake he'd ever made. David Chen, my co-founder and the closest thing I had to family in San Francisco, noticed the change immediately. You're working like someone lit a fire under you, he observed during one of our late-night strategy sessions in our cramped Palo Alto office. The truth was, someone had. My father's dismissal had ignited something primal in me, not just the desire to succeed, but the need to succeed so spectacularly that failure would become impossible to imagine. The Walmart pilot program results had exceeded our wildest projections, but I wasn't satisfied with simply meeting expectations anymore. I wanted to shatter them. We expanded the team, hiring the best AI engineers money could buy from Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. Our algorithm evolved from predicting simple supply disruptions to anticipating market trends, optimizing inventory across multiple variables, and identifying profit opportunities that human analysis would miss entirely. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday in September. Our system identified a pattern in global shipping data that suggested a massive disruption in electronic supply chains was imminent, 3 weeks before it actually happened. When the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal, our clients were the only retailers with adequate inventory buffers. The savings for our customers totaled over $200 million in that week alone. Tech blogs started calling it the crystal ball algorithm. Fortune magazine featured us on their cover with the headline, "The AI That Sees the Future." But the validation that mattered most came from our clients. Target signed a 5-year, $50 million contract. Amazon approached us about acquisition talks starting at $800 million. Every major retailer in America wanted our technology. The funding rounds became a feeding frenzy. After Sequoia's initial investment, Andreessen Horowitz led our Series C with $150 million. Our valuation soared to $2 billion, officially making MindBridge a unicorn startup. At 28, I was the youngest woman to ever found a billion-dollar AI company. The irony wasn't lost on me. The father who said I'd never build anything great had motivated me to build something unprecedented. But success in Silicon Valley operates on a different timeline than family reconciliation. While tech journalists wrote profiles about my overnight success, my phone remained silent. No congratulations from Portland, no acknowledgement of the articles I knew my relatives were sharing on social media. The family that should have been celebrating my achievements was still processing the reality that the daughter they'd dismissed had become the success story they'd never imagined. During this period, I made a decision that would define everything that followed. Rather than simply enjoying my success privately, I would make it impossible to ignore. I hired Rebecca Martinez, one of the best PR executives in Silicon Valley, with a specific mandate: make MindBridge and my personal story so prominent in the business world that even my construction foreman father would encounter it in his daily news consumption. The media strategy worked flawlessly. Rebecca secured profiles in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and TechCrunch. I was invited to speak at the World Economic Forum in Davos, sharing stages with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. The culmination came when Time magazine named me to their 40 Under 40 list, featuring a 2-page spread about disrupting traditional business through artificial intelligence. Each article, each speaking engagement, each award was both professional validation and personal ammunition. I wasn't just building a company anymore. I was constructing an undeniable narrative of success that would make my father's words at the barbecue look like the misjudgment of the century. The decision to go public came in February, exactly 8 months after that devastating family barbecue. Our investment bankers at Goldman Sachs, ironically, the same firm where Michael worked, projected an opening valuation between $2.5 and $3 billion. The IPO would make me one of the youngest self-made billionaires in American history, with a personal net worth exceeding $2 billion. But beyond the financial milestone, going public would serve another purpose. It would create a moment of undeniable vindication that would force my family to confront the magnitude of their misjudgment. The girl they'd dismissed as a dreamer would ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, with her face broadcast to millions of Americans watching financial news. As the IPO date approached, I found myself thinking less about the money and more about that moment of public humiliation 8 months earlier. Soon, very soon, those words would become a historical footnote to a much larger story about underestimation, determination, and the sweet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. The 3 weeks leading up to our IPO felt like preparing for war, except this battlefield would be the New York Stock Exchange, and my weapons would be market performance and media attention. Rebecca Martinez had orchestrated a publicity campaign that would make our public debut impossible to ignore, especially for a certain construction foreman in Portland who still believed his daughter would never amount to anything significant. The roadshow began in earnest, with presentations to institutional investors across the country. Standing in boardrooms filled with portfolio managers controlling billions in assets, I felt the weight of vindication building with each enthusiastic reception. These weren't friends humoring my computer hobby. These were hardened Wall Street professionals willing to bet enormous sums on my vision. During our presentation to Fidelity's technology team, the lead analyst asked a question that stopped me cold. Ms. Thompson, what drives you personally? Your passion for this technology seems to go beyond typical entrepreneurial motivation. For a moment, I considered sharing the real story. The family barbecue, the public dismissal, the fuel of proving someone wrong. Instead, I answered professionally about solving complex business problems, but the question lingered. My motivation did run deeper than normal entrepreneurial drive, and soon the whole world would understand why. The media attention intensified as our IPO date approached. CNBC wanted a live interview on opening day. The Wall Street Journal was preparing a feature story about AI disruption in retail. Most significantly, 60 Minutes had reached out about a segment on young entrepreneurs changing traditional industries. Each interview request represented another opportunity to make my success impossible to ignore. 3 days before the IPO, I received an unexpected call that would add another layer to the unfolding drama. Michael's voice on the phone was strained, professional, and uncomfortable. Jess, I just wanted to say, congratulations on the IPO. The Goldman team has been talking about your company. It's impressive. His words were careful, measured, lacking any acknowledgement of our family's treatment of my ambitions. Thank you, Michael, I replied coolly. I appreciate that. Have you talked to Dad lately? he asked, and I could hear the real question underneath. Are you planning to make this awkward for the family? Not since the barbecue, I said simply. Has he seen the coverage? A pause. Yeah, he's seen it. Mom showed him the Time article. He doesn't really know what to say. The conversation ended with promises to catch up soon, that we both knew were empty. But Michael's call confirmed what I'd hoped. My family was watching, processing, and struggling to reconcile their dismissed daughter with the business phenomenon she'd become. 2 days before going public, Rebecca presented me with the final media schedule. Opening bell at 9:30 a.m., CNBC live interview immediately after, Wall Street Journal photographer for the victory shots, and then the press conference. She paused, studying my face. Jess, this is going to be one of the biggest IPO stories of the year. Are you ready for this level of attention? I thought about that question as I walked through Times Square that evening, looking up at the electronic billboards advertising everything from Broadway shows to soft drinks. Tomorrow, my face would be on financial news broadcasts across the country, including whatever channel my father watched during his morning coffee routine. The girl he'd said would never build anything great would be ringing the opening bell for a multi-billion-dollar company. The night before the IPO, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing the moment when the opening bell would ring, when our stock symbol MIND would appear on trading screens, when the valuation would become real and public and undeniable. But more than that, I imagined my father sitting in his kitchen in Portland, watching the news coverage, finally understanding the magnitude of his misjudgment. At 3 a.m., I called David from my hotel room near Wall Street. Are you awake? Of course I'm awake, he laughed. We're about to become billionaires in 6 hours. Who sleeps before that? Do you ever think about the people who doubted you? I asked. Every successful day. He replied without hesitation. That's what separates us from people who accept limitations. We remember every person who said we couldn't, and we use that memory as fuel. As dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and possibility, I realized this wasn't just about business success anymore. This was about the moment when years of family dismissal would collide with undeniable achievement, when "you'll never build anything great" would become the most expensive words my father ever spoke. The morning of March 15th dawned crisp and clear over Manhattan, the kind of perfect spring day that feels designed for momentous occasions. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel suite at 6 a.m., adjusting the navy blue power suit I'd chosen specifically for this moment. Today, at exactly 9:30 a.m., I would ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, and my father's words from 8 months ago would officially become the worst prediction in our family's history. The NYSE building buzzed with controlled chaos as our team arrived for the pre-market ceremonies. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically, financial reporters tested their microphones, and our investment bankers from Goldman Sachs moved through final preparations with military precision. David stood beside me on the famous trading floor, both of us trying to process that we'd actually made it to this moment. Initial pricing came in at $40 per share, our lead banker announced, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. That puts your opening valuation at $2, $9 billion. The number hit me like a physical force. Not only had we achieved what everyone said was impossible, we'd exceeded the most optimistic projections. At 9:15 a.m., we took our positions on the platform overlooking the trading floor. The iconic NYSE bell gleamed under television lights, and I could see red camera indicators blinking as news networks prepared for live coverage. My phone had been buzzing all morning with congratulations from fellow entrepreneurs, investors, and tech leaders, but the messages I'd been unconsciously hoping for, from Portland, from family, remained absent. Rebecca appeared at my elbow with final updates. CNBC is leading with your story. The Wall Street Journal headline is AI startup MindBridge goes public with record valuation. And Jessica? She paused, her expression shifting to something more personal. The Portland Oregonian picked up the story. They're calling you the city's most successful tech entrepreneur ever. The local coverage meant my father would see this whether he wanted to or not. Construction foremen read local newspapers. The man who'd dismissed my ambitions as computer games would open his morning paper to find his daughter on the business section front page. At 9:28 a.m., the floor fell silent except for the mechanical hum of trading computers. I gripped the ceremonial hammer, its weight surprisingly substantial in my hand. Around me, our team of 12 employees who'd believed in this vision, when it was nothing but code and determination prepared to become millionaires. 30 seconds, the floor manager announced. I thought about that July barbecue, about standing in my family's backyard while my father delivered his verdict on my potential. I thought about the nights I'd worked until 3 a.m., driven by equal parts passion and spite. I thought about every family gathering where my achievements were dismissed as hobbies while Michael's conventional success was celebrated. 10 seconds. The countdown reached 0, and I brought the hammer down on the bell with all the force of 8 months' worth of vindication. The sound echoed across the trading floor, and immediately, chaos erupted. Traders began shouting orders, computer screens lit up with mined stock activity, and our share price jumped from $42 to $51 in the first minute of trading. But the real satisfaction came 3 minutes later when Rebecca showed me her phone. Your father's watching, she said, turning the screen toward me. There, on the livestream comments of CNBC's coverage, was a message from my cousin Emma. Uncle Robert is at the diner, staring at the TV. He looks like he's seen a ghost. The CNBC interview happened in a blur of cameras and congratulations. The anchor, Maria Bartiromo, asked about our technology, our growth projections, and our plans for the capital we'd raised. But the question that mattered most came at the end. Jessica, you're 29 years old and now worth over $1 billion. What would you say to people who doubted this was possible? I looked directly into the camera, knowing my answer would be broadcast across the country, knowing my father might be watching. I'd say that other people's limitations don't have to become your own. When someone tells you that you'll never build anything great, you have 2 choices: accept their assessment or prove them spectacularly wrong. By noon, our stock had stabilized at $58 per share, giving MindBridge a market capitalization of $2 billion. My personal stake was worth $1, $34 billion, making me the youngest self-made female billionaire in American history. The milestone felt surreal, but what felt more real was the text message that arrived at 12:47 p.m. from an Oregon area code I recognized immediately. Jessica, this is your father. I saw the news. I was wrong. I'm proud of you. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a full minute, reading it 3 times before the words fully registered. The validation I'd spent 8 months building toward had finally arrived, delivered not through media coverage or public achievement, but through 17 simple words that acknowledged the magnitude of his misjudgment. Standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, surrounded by the celebration of our successful IPO, I realized that this moment represented more than financial success. It was the complete transformation of a family narrative that had defined me for decades. The daughter who would never build anything great had just built something unprecedented, and everyone who'd dismissed her potential would now have to live with the consequences of their blindness. The weeks following our IPO transformed my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Beyond the obvious financial changes, there was something deeper. A shift in how I moved through the world and how the world responded to me. The girl who'd once felt invisible at family gatherings was now fielding interview requests from major publications and speaking invitations from Fortune 500 companies. The conversation with my father, when it finally happened, was perhaps the most surreal 30 minutes of my adult life. We met at a quiet coffee shop in downtown Portland, 2 weeks after the IPO, and I watched this man who dominated my childhood struggle to reconcile his assumptions with reality. I don't understand half of what your company does, he admitted, stirring his coffee nervously. Artificial intelligence, supply chain optimization, it might as well be rocket science to me. But I understand success, and I understand that I was completely wrong about you. His apology was genuine but incomplete. He could acknowledge his error without fully grasping the damage his dismissal had caused or the fuel it had provided for my determination. I'm proud of you now, he said, as if pride were something that could be retroactively applied to make up for years of dismissal. Thank you, I replied simply. The hurt was still there, probably always would be, but it no longer defined our relationship. I needed to prove this to myself more than to you. The dynamic with Michael required more complex navigation. His congratulations felt layered with his own insecurities about being overshadowed by the sister he'd always outperformed. During a family dinner in April, he made a comment that revealed everything. It's funny how quickly things can change. 6 months ago, I was the successful one in the family. You're still successful, I replied carefully. Success isn't a zero-sum game. But we both knew something fundamental had shifted. The family hierarchy that had seemed permanent for 3 decades had been completely inverted, and everyone was still adjusting to the new reality. The most unexpected change came in how my mother related to me. During a private conversation at that same family dinner, she revealed something I'd never known. Your father was afraid of your ambition, Jessica. He saw you working on those projects as a teenager and worried you'd end up disappointed when they didn't lead anywhere. He thought he was protecting you by encouraging more practical goals. This revelation reframed decades of dismissal. My father's lack of support hadn't stemmed from genuine belief in my limitations, but from his own limited understanding of what was possible. He'd projected his own constraints onto my potential, trying to save me from disappointment in a field he couldn't comprehend. By summer, MindBridge had expanded to 200 employees across 3 offices. Our stock price had stabilized in the mid-60s, and we were signing contracts with major retailers globally. The technology that had started as a supply chain optimization tool was evolving into a comprehensive business intelligence platform. Every day brought validation that our vision was not only viable, but transformative. The personal satisfaction came in unexpected moments. When David and I were featured on the cover of Forbes as the AI duo revolutionizing retail, I sent a copy to my father without commentary. He called that evening just to say, "I keep the magazine on my workbench. Some of the guys can't believe you're my daughter." The ultimate vindication arrived in September, exactly 1 year after that devastating barbecue. Our family gathered again for another cousin's wedding, but this time, the dynamic was completely different. Instead of dismissing my work as a hobby, relatives approached me for business advice. Uncle Tom, whose supply chain complaints had sparked the original confrontation, sheepishly asked if our technology could help his plumbing business. Most meaningfully, my father introduced me to his colleagues not as my daughter who plays with computers, but as Jessica, who built that AI company you've been reading about. The pride in his voice was genuine, even if it had taken $1 billion valuation to earn it. Standing in the same backyard where he'd delivered his crushing verdict 12 months earlier, I felt a profound sense of completion. The wound of his words had healed, but the scar remained as a reminder of what was possible when dismissal became determination. As the evening wound down, my father pulled me aside for a private moment. "I want you to know something," he said quietly. "That day when I said you'd never build anything great, it was the stupidest thing I've ever said in my life. Not just because I was wrong about your potential, but because I should have been supporting you instead of doubting you." "It worked out," I replied, looking out at the family gathering where I was now the undisputed success story. "Maybe I needed that doubt to fuel the determination." He shook his head. "You shouldn't have needed it. You deserved support from the beginning." Later that night, driving back to San Francisco in my Tesla, I reflected on the strange journey from dismissal to vindication. The family that had once made me feel like an outsider now treated me like a celebrity, but the change felt hollow compared to the internal transformation I'd undergone. Building MindBridge had taught me that external validation, even from family, was secondary to the satisfaction of pursuing your vision regardless of who believes in it. The real victory wasn't proving my father wrong. It was discovering that his opinion had never defined my potential in the first place. Sometimes the most painful words become the most powerful catalysts, not because they're true, but because they force you to prove how magnificently untrue they are. If you've ever been told you'll never amount to anything significant, remember this. Other people's limitations reflect their imagination, not your potential. The person who dismisses your dreams is often the same person who will later claim they always believed in you. Don't wait for their permission to build something extraordinary. Have you ever used someone's doubt as fuel for your success? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of turning family dismissal into unstoppable determination. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, and building something so undeniably great that doubt becomes impossible.